The moment I heard those words, something inside me cracked. After 65 years of learning how to hold my tongue, of swallowing pride when necessary, of choosing peace over confrontation, in that single moment, I felt my carefully constructed patience dissolve like sugar in hot coffee. She wasn't invited. 4 syllables that confirmed everything I'd suspected about Barbara Whitfield for the past 18 months. 4 syllables that made a mockery of the 22,836 gifts I'd contributed to my only daughter's wedding. 4 syllables that threatened to turn what should have been Rachel's perfect day into another battlefield in Barbara's one-sided war against me. I stood frozen in the doorway of Giovanni's, the upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Boston, where we were having the rehearsal dinner, watching Barbara's diamond-encrusted hand grip the maitre d's sleeve as she leaned in, her salon-perfect blonde hair swinging forward to shield her whisper from curious eyes. Not quite enough to shield it from my ears, though. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm Eleanor Harris, mother of the bride." The young maitre d' glanced nervously between Barbara and me, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Poor kid couldn't have been more than 25, probably working his way through college. Now he was caught between 2 grandmothers with a combined age of 130 years and the emotional restraint of teenagers. He stammered, his bow tie suddenly seeming too tight. Barbara turned, her face arranging itself into a mask of surprise that wouldn't have fooled a child. "Eleanor, I didn't see you there. We were just discussing the seating chart." Liar. The word formed in my mind with crystal clarity. But decades of teaching 3rd graders had given me exceptional impulse control. By telling him I wasn't invited to my own daughter's rehearsal dinner? I clutched my handbag tighter, feeling the outline of my phone inside. The phone that held a text message from Rachel sent 3 weeks ago. "Mom, dinner at Giovanni's, 7 p.m. sharp on Friday. Barbara's handling the details, but wanted me to confirm you're coming." Barbara waved a dismissive hand, her 4-carat diamond catching the light. "A simple misunderstanding. Of course you're invited." She turned to the maitre d'. "We'll need another place setting at table 3. Another place setting. As if I were an afterthought. As if I hadn't raised Rachel single-handedly after Henry died 27 years ago. As if I hadn't worked 2 jobs to put her through college, while Barbara was busy with her country club memberships and 3rd marriage. "Table 3? I repeated, my voice dropping an octave like it used to when my 3rd graders were misbehaving. I believe the mother of the bride traditionally sits at the main table. The maitre d' looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. I almost felt sorry for him. "Oh, Eleanor," Barbara laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "We're not being traditional. Table 3 is for the extended family. Table 1 is just for the bride, groom, best man, maid of honor, and—" She hesitated just long enough to twist the knife. "The groom's parents. Not the bride's mother. Just the groom's parents. Mark's father, Harold, was a quiet man who'd barely spoken 10 words to me, and Barbara who'd spoken far too many, none of them sincere. I could feel heat rising in my chest, climbing up my neck, threatening to turn my carefully made-up face an undignified shade of red. I had spent $342 at the salon that afternoon, more than I'd ever spent on myself, determined to look my best. At 65, I wasn't vain, but I wasn't invisible either, or at least I shouldn't have been. "I see," was all I said, though what I saw was much more than a seating arrangement. I saw 18 months of subtle undermining. Barbara questioning Rachel's decision to use my late mother's ring as her something old. Barbara suggesting the dusty rose bridesmaid dresses I'd helped choose were a bit matronly. Don't you think? Barbara casually mentioning how the 3-bedroom house she and Harold were giving the couple as a wedding present was so much more practical than sentimental trinkets. My sentimental trinket being the handmade quilt that had taken me 8 months to complete, stitched with fabric from Rachel's baby clothes, her high school graduation dress, and Henry's favorite flannel shirt. I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was here. For Rachel, my beautiful, accomplished daughter, who'd somehow managed to fall in love with a wonderful young man despite his mother. Mark was everything I could have hoped for in a son-in-law. Kind, intelligent, hard-working. He treated Rachel with a respect that reminded me of my Henry before cancer took him when Rachel was only 5. Actually, came a voice from behind me, my mother will be sitting with me at the main table. Rachel. My chest loosened at the sound of her voice, and I turned to see her standing in the restaurant's entrance, her hand entwined with Mark's. She looked radiant in a simple white cocktail dress, her dark hair, so like mine had been before it turned silver, cascading over her shoulders. "Darling," Barbara exclaimed, moving forward to embrace Mark. "We were just sorting out some confusion with the seating." "No confusion." "Mom," Mark said firmly, and I felt a surge of affection for this young man who was about to become my son. "We discussed this. Both our mothers sit at the main table." Barbara's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "Of course, dear. I just thought, since Eleanor arrived so late." "I'm right on time," I said, glancing at my watch. 7:00 p.m. sharp, as requested." "We told family 6:30, Barbara countered smoothly, "for pre-dinner cocktails." Rachel's brow furrowed. "No, Mom B. We said 7 eyes for everyone. That's what's on all the invitations." An invitation I hadn't received, I realized. I'd only known about the dinner through Rachel's text. Had that been deliberate on Barbara's part? "Must have been another misunderstanding," Barbara said lightly, but her eyes met mine in silent challenge. That's when I knew. This wasn't going to stop after the wedding. This would be the next 30 years. Every holiday, every birthday, every milestone in my daughter's life would be a battlefield. Barbara would make sure I felt like an outsider, the lesser grandmother when babies came along, the afterthought at Christmas dinner, unless I did something about it now. "Rachel, honey," I said, keeping my voice level. "Could I have a word with Barbara? Woman to woman?" Rachel looked uncertain. She'd witnessed enough tense interactions between us to be wary. "Mom, just a quick chat," I assured her. "We'll join you in a minute." Mark, bless him, seemed to understand. "Come on, Rach, let's greet the others. Mom, Eleanor, please don't be long. People are waiting to toast you both." As they walked away, I turned to Barbara. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" The maitre d', still hovering nearby, gestured toward a small alcove with a coat check. "You can use this space, Mom. It's quiet." Barbara followed me reluctantly, her Louboutin heels clicking on the marble floor. When we were alone, I didn't waste time. "Why are you doing this?" She blinked, her expertly applied makeup not creasing a bit. "Doing what?" "Trying to exclude me, minimize me, turn my daughter's wedding into a competition that I wasn't aware I'd entered." "Don't be dramatic, Eleanor," she scoffed. "This isn't about you." "Exactly," I agreed. "It's about Rachel and Mark. It's about 2 families coming together. Yet you've done everything possible to make me feel unwelcome from day one." Barbara sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. "If you felt excluded, perhaps that's your own insecurity. I've been nothing but accommodating." The gaslighting was so blatant it almost made me laugh. "Accommodating? You didn't even send me an invitation to this dinner. You told the staff I wasn't invited. You've overruled every suggestion I've made for the wedding." "Well," she sniffed, adjusting her diamond bracelet, "some of your ideas were rather modest. Mark comes from a certain background, with expectations. Mark couldn't care less about your country club friends or impressing your social circle. I interrupted. He loves my daughter for who she is, a kind, intelligent woman who was raised with real values, not price tags. Barbara's carefully controlled facade cracked slightly. How dare you imply— I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've spent the last 18 months trying to make me feel small, like I don't belong in my own daughter's life, and I want to know why. For a moment, something flickered across Barbara's face, something almost like vulnerability. Then it was gone. You couldn't possibly understand, she said coldly. You and Rachel, with your perfect mother-daughter bond. Do you know how many times Mark has mentioned what a wonderful mother you are? How he wishes I had been more like you? The admission stunned me into momentary silence. Mark thinks I was a terrible mother, Barbara continued, her voice tighter. Too busy with charity galas and board meetings while nannies raised him. He doesn't say it, but I know. And then he brings home Rachel, who practically worships the ground you walk on. And I'm supposed to what? Sit back and watch everyone admire St. Eleanor? I hadn't expected this raw insecurity from a woman who seemed to have everything. Barbara, I said more gently, this isn't a competition. There's room for both of us in their lives. Is there? She challenged. Because from where I stand, you've already won. Mark adores you. Rachel tolerates me. Harold thinks I'm being ridiculous. I'm just trying to matter. The realization hit me then. Barbara wasn't trying to push me out because she disliked me specifically. She was terrified of being pushed out herself. I thought about Rachel and Mark, about the life they were building together. I thought about future grandchildren who deserved two grandmothers who could at least be civil to each other. We're about to become family, I said finally. Not by choice, but through the people we both love. We can spend the next decades fighting over holidays and birthdays and who gets to babysit, or we can try something different. Barbara eyed me suspiciously. Like what? Like acknowledging that we both want the same thing. To be important in our children's lives. To be respected and included. And the quickest way to ensure neither of us gets that is to force them to choose sides. She was silent for a long moment, considering my words. Finally, she gave a small nod. I may have been overzealous in asserting my position. Coming from Barbara, this was practically an apology on bended knee. And I could probably be more understanding of your desire to make this wedding special, I conceded. You only have one son after all. Another moment of silence passed between us, not exactly comfortable, but no longer crackling with hostility. Table 1, Barbara said abruptly, for both of us. And I'll make sure you receive a proper invitation to the bridesmaids' luncheon next week. It wasn't friendship, but it was a start. Thank you. And perhaps you'd like to join Rachel and me for our final dress fitting. Your input on accessories would be appreciated. The words nearly stuck in my throat. But I got them out. Barbara looked surprised, then gave a small, genuine smile. I would like that. As we walked back to join the others, I spotted Rachel watching us anxiously. When she saw us approaching together, neither of us bleeding or sporting black eyes, relief washed over her face. Beside her, Mark looked equally surprised but pleased. Everything okay? Rachel asked as we reached the main table. I glanced at Barbara, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes, dear, I said, squeezing my daughter's hand. We've come to an understanding. A necessary one, Barbara added, taking her seat beside Harold. Now, who's ready for champagne? As the waiter poured the bubbly into crystal flutes, I caught Barbara's eye across the table. We weren't friends, probably never would be. But we'd found common ground in the most important thing, love for our children. I raised my glass slightly in her direction before turning to the rest of the table. It wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Sometimes winning doesn't mean defeating your opponent. It means changing the game entirely. 6 months later, I sat in my small living room, a cup of tea cooling on the side table, as I worked on a new quilt. This one featured fabrics from the wedding, a swatch from Rachel's dress, pieces from the table linens, even a bit of the ribbon that had decorated the pews. My phone buzzed with a text message. Eleanor, Harold, and I are hosting Thanksgiving this year. Rachel and Mark will be there, of course. I've attached the invitation, but wanted to ask personally. Would you like to come a day early to help with preparations? You mentioned your mother's cranberry sauce recipe, and I'd love to learn it. Barbara, I smiled to myself, remembering how close I'd come to creating a permanent rift that night at Giovanni's. How easy it would have been to give in to decades of accumulated pride and hurt feelings. Instead, I'd chosen the harder path, the path of compromise and understanding. Not for Barbara's sake, but for Rachel's, for Mark's, for the family we were all trying to build together. I texted back, I'll bring the cranberries, and maybe we can find time to discuss Christmas plans. I was thinking we could host together this year. Family isn't just about blood. Sometimes it's about choice. About deciding that the people your children love are worth loving too, or at least worth understanding. Barbara and I would never be best friends, but we'd found a way to be family. And in the end, that was what mattered most. As I set my phone down and returned to my quilting, I thought about all the moments yet to come. Birthdays, holidays, maybe grandchildren someday. There would be disagreements, of course, moments of tension. Old habits die hard. But we had laid a foundation for something better than warfare, something that might, with time and patience, even resemble peace. And that, I decided as I stitched another piece of wedding fabric into place, was victory enough. The calm didn't last, of course. 3 months after that first Thanksgiving, Barbara called me in a state I'd never heard before, voice trembling, words tumbling out between what sounded suspiciously like sobs. "Eleanor, I need your help," she said without preamble. "It's about the house." The house, that magnificent 3-bedroom colonial in Brookline that Barbara and Harold had gifted Rachel and Mark. The house that made my modest retirement condo look like a storage closet in comparison. The house that had been, in Barbara's own words, so much more practical than sentimental trinkets. "What about the house?" I asked cautiously. "Harold and we're having financial difficulties." The admission seemed physically painful for her. The market crashed, investments went bad, and she took a shuddering breath. "We can't make the final payment on Rachel and Mark's house, the one we promised as their wedding gift." I sat down heavily on my worn sofa, processing this information. "Have you told them?" "How can I?" The desperation in her voice was palpable. "After all my talk about providing for them, about giving them the perfect start, I can't bear to see the disappointment in Mark's eyes." For a moment, I considered how easy it would be to let Barbara handle this mess herself. Let her be the one to disappoint them for once. Let her perfect facade crack wide open. But then I thought about Rachel and Mark, about the home they were planning, the future they were building. This wasn't about Barbara or me. It was about them. "How much is the final payment?" I asked. $86,000, Barbara whispered. "Due next week." I nearly dropped the phone. $86,000, more than twice my annual pension. The number seemed to hang in the air between us, impossible and damning. "I wouldn't ask," Barbara continued hurriedly, "but all our assets are frozen or tied up in legal proceedings. It's temporary. Harold's lawyer assures us we'll recover most of it. But not in time for this payment. If we miss it, the kids lose the house and the $172,000 we've already paid." My mind raced through options, calculations, possibilities. "I don't have that kind of money, Barbara." I know, she said quickly. "But you have the beach house in Cape Cod. Rachel mentioned it's been in your family for generations." My breath caught. The small 2-bedroom cottage on the Cape had been my parents' retirement home, left to me when they passed. It wasn't grand, just a weathered, shingled house with a screened porch and a view of the bay. but it held every childhood summer memory Rachel had. It was the one place I felt closest to Henry, where we'd spent our honeymoon and where I scattered some of his ashes. "You want me to sell my family home?" My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. "Not sell," Barbara clarified. "Just take out a home equity loan. Once our situation stabilizes, we'll pay you back with interest. The kids never need to know." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. The cottage was the only real asset I had, the only inheritance I could leave Rachel someday. "I need time to think," I said finally. "We don't have time," Barbara replied, tension returning to her voice. "The payment is due in 8 days." After we hung up, I drove to the cottage, something I rarely did in winter. The narrow road was slick with half-melted snow, and the little house looked smaller somehow against the gray February sky. Inside, it smelled of salt air and old wood, of summers past and memories preserved. I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen where Mom had taught Rachel to make clam chowder. The living room where Dad had built fires on chilly nights. The back bedroom where Henry and I had slept, windows open to catch the ocean breeze. Taking out a loan meant risking this place. If Barbara and Harold couldn't repay me, I might lose it forever. Yet not helping meant Rachel and Mark would lose their home before they'd even fully moved in. I made my decision standing on the weathered back porch, looking out at the winter-dark waters of the bay. 3 days later, I sat across from Barbara at a quiet corner table in a coffee shop, midway between our homes. She looked different, her usual immaculate appearance slightly frayed at the edges. Less makeup. Hair pulled back simply. Clothes expensive but not ostentatious. I slid a check across the table. $86,000. It's everything I could get. Barbara stared at the check, then at me, genuine shock evident in her expression. "You're actually doing this? After everything?" "Not for you," I said simply. "For them." She reached for the check with trembling fingers. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll pay it back as soon as you can. I've taken a second mortgage on my only real asset. I'm trusting you with my future, Barbara." She nodded solemnly. "I will. Harold and I both will. The lawyers say by summer." I held up a hand. "I don't need the details, just make it right." As I turned to leave, Barbara called after me. "Eleanor? Thank you. I don't deserve this kindness." I paused, looking back at this woman who had tried so hard to make me feel small, who now seemed diminished herself. "Maybe not," I agreed. "But that's what family does. We help each other when it matters." I didn't tell Rachel about the loan. Didn't tell her that for 6 anxious months I checked my bank account daily, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Didn't tell her how I lay awake some nights, calculating how many years I'd need to work past retirement if Barbara and Harold defaulted. Then, on a sweltering July afternoon, my doorbell rang. Barbara stood on my threshold, Harold beside her, both looking solemn. "May we come in?" she asked formally. I led them to my small living room, offering iced tea, which they politely declined. Harold, who had always been a background figure in our interactions, took the lead. "Eleanor, we've come to settle our debt." He placed a folder on my coffee table. "Inside you'll find a cashier's check for $86,000 plus the agreed-upon interest. Also documentation showing the house is now fully paid for and titled solely in Rachel and Mark's names." I opened the folder, verifying the check with shaking hands. "Our financial situation has stabilized," Harold continued. "Not to previous levels. We've had to make significant lifestyle adjustments, but we're secure now." "And wiser," Barbara added quietly, "about what matters." I nodded, relief washing through me. I'm glad. For all of us. Barbara looked around my modest living room, seeing it, truly seeing it, perhaps for the first time. "You risked everything," she said softly. "Your retirement, your security." "It wasn't a risk," I corrected her. It was a choice, one I'd make again. Harold cleared his throat. There's something else. Barbara? Barbara reached into her purse and withdrew a small blue box. This is for you. A token of our gratitude, although it hardly seems adequate. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm. A tiny cottage, meticulously detailed right down to the screened porch. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely touched. It's also an invitation, Barbara explained. We'd like to spend a weekend at your Cape House this summer with you. Harold's never seen it, and I'd like to understand more about where Rachel comes from, where you come from. The request surprised me. This wasn't obligation or formality. This was genuine interest. A step beyond our careful truce towards something that might one day resemble friendship. Labor Day weekend, I suggested. The water's still warm enough for swimming. As they prepared to leave, Barbara hesitated at the door. We never told them, about your help with the house. Good, I said firmly. It's better that way. She studied my face. You really don't want the credit? The recognition? I thought about Rachel and Mark, about the life they were building in their new home, about family dinners and holiday gatherings where tensions had gradually eased, about the fragile peace we'd constructed. Some things matter more than recognition, I told her. Some gifts are meant to be given silently. Barbara nodded, understanding passing between us. Then, surprising us both, she leaned forward and hugged me briefly. See you on Labor Day, Eleanor. The summer breeze carried the scent of grilling hamburgers and salt air as I watched from the cottage porch. On the small stretch of private beach, Rachel was showing Mark and Harold how to dig for clams the way my father had taught her. Barbara sat nearby under an umbrella, looking oddly content in borrowed shorts and a simple blouse, her designer wardrobe left behind in Boston. Mom, Rachel called, waving excitedly. We found enough for chowder, I waved back, smiling at their childlike excitement. Later we would gather in the small kitchen, Barbara and I chopping vegetables side by side, while Harold opened wine and the kids set the table with mismatched plates that had been in the cottage since I was a child. We weren't a perfect family. Barbara still occasionally made comments that set my teeth on edge. I still sometimes felt the sting of insecurity beside her polished presence. But we'd found a way forward, a path through complicated emotions towards something real and lasting. As I watched my daughter laugh with her husband, as I prepared to make my mother's chowder recipe in the kitchen where she'd taught me, as I considered the unlikely ally I'd found in Barbara, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. Life had a way of surprising you, bringing connections where you least expected them, teaching lessons through unlikely teachers. The sun glinted off the bay, turning the water to diamonds. Just like life, I thought. Sometimes rough, sometimes calm, but always, always worth the journey. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left